Right. So, as Tuesday said, we are very lucky to have Les here tonight. He is the network facilitator at Douglas Education Service District and the father to a daughter of CFC syndrome. He's going to talk about some really key topics for long term planning and transitioning to adulthood. There's a long list of topics under those. So, I will let him go ahead and get started.
Well, hello everyone. Can you hear me okay, Ashley? Just a thumbs up, make sure everything's good. All right. And it's good to see so many of the people that I've met at conferences and messaged online and things. Les Rogers, you can call me Les. I work in Southwest Oregon as a transition network facilitator. That means I help students on IEP and 504 plans transition to adulthood. Um, I've been a high school teacher, football coach. I've directed trio grants. I'm an ADA, a certified ADA coordinator. I serve on the state special education council. I've done a lot of things. Um, and if you want to read all that, that's what this slide's for. But we have only so much time, so that's my background. Um, I love what I do so much. I'm going to get to do it again next year. I was just sharing with everyone, uh, and again, helping students on IEP and 504 plans transition to adulthood is an amazing field to be in and super fun. So uh, here we go. CFC transition to adulthood. And as we all know, CFC is a large continuum. So if you feel like this might not apply to my child, just wait a few minutes because I'm covering a lot of options as we go through each of these topics. So we're going to start off, we're going to talk about Medicaid waivers briefly, differences between children and adult waivers. I won't dive too deep into this because it could take each one of these topics could take a whole hour plus. Um, but I am going to give you some resources, different waivers that states have, and then give you a resource where you can go look up what the options are for adult waivers and sort of the general the general choices you can make in adult waivers on how you might handle them in different states. And that brings me to another point. States all handle Medicaid a little differently, and so it makes it a little harder to speak on a national level to everyone, but there is some general overlying commonalities between the states that we'll talk about today as well. We'll talk about day support programs and work options and how you might capitalize on those if you're thinking about work or day support programs. We're going to talk about housing models and options. This presentation is going to be sent out to you all. I have it on Google Slides for you, so you'll be able to access all these links. I highly encourage you to dive in and click on the things and make note of the things that you're interested in. And as you have questions, if you could put them in the chat, there'll also be opportunities to engage, and we'll do that through the chat as well. Um, Number four, we'll talk a little bit about who will support later in life and different choices that you can make around that. We'll talk about guardianship and conservatorship, among other things. And then we'll talk lastly about benefits, although benefits are kind of sprinkled in throughout the presentation, as you're going to see. So just reiterating, we're going to be covering tons of topics on transition. We're just kind of skipping a stone across the top. I do want you to know I have offered to CFC if there's specific topics families want, like for example, I want to do a deeper dive into housing and talk about grand care versus supported living versus group home living. What are the options? How might I evaluate a group home and that kind of stuff? We'll talk a little bit about that, but if you want deeper dives into any of these topics, where should you put that in the chat? Like, hey, I'd really like a deeper dive into housing after we're done or whatever. So moving right along, I'm from Oregon, and so Oregon's kind of unique. We have no state-run intellectual and developmental disability institutions. Those all closed now about 15 years ago. We also ended sheltered workshops and some minimum wage employment. in the state. And so here's a little timeline. And the reason I mention all this is because I want you to know sort of what it could look like. And yes, that is possible to not have intellectual and developmental disability institutions. We've done it. Um, my job was actually created out of what happened in 2012 with this Lane versus Brown lawsuit. So that was a lawsuit to end sheltered workshops. Sheltered workshops are congregate or group workplaces that employ people that experience disabilities in a sheltered setting away from society, and often they're paid less than minimum wage. We ended those in Oregon. Um, Final settlement agreement was in August of 22. There's a lot of other pieces here. Oregon also is what's called a 1915K waiver or K plan state, um, which means that we have no wait lists for our waivers, for that waiver specifically, for the K plan waiver, which is great. Um, and you might be saying, well, that's not the case in my state. I'm just sharing that this is how Oregon's set up, and it could be an ideal, sort of idealistic view of things. But I just want you to know that it is possible. We do it. And also to know kind of where I'm coming from. And I do realize that some states have very long wait lists for waivers. And we'll talk a little bit about how to work through those as we move through the presentation. Just one other piece of data that I like to point out in 2016, the percentage of people utilizing services for work from the Office of Developmental Disability Services and working on what's called competitive integrated employment. The rest of us would call that a job that's not in a sheltered workshop. In 2016, only 15% uh, of the people that were receiving developmental disability services in Oregon um, were working in competitive integrated employment. By 2022, those working had reached 37.8% were working in competitive integrated employment. So that's a huge success, more than doubling the number of people working out in the community is pretty awesome. And so we'll just kind of move along. Just wanted to touch on some of these kind of cool things about my state. And now Medicaid waivers. So this is our first opportunity to utilize the chat. And so this question, what are some things you have done that have worked well to prepare for transition, and what things have not gone well? So if you'll put in the chat a few of the things that have gone well for you, and we'll just give it a minute or so, and a few of the things that have not gone well as you work toward transition for youth. Or if you've already gone through transitioning to adulthood, your students exited out of the education setting and maybe is doing other things. Go ahead and put in the chat anything that's gone well, anything that's not gone well. Trying to find an appropriate day hab in our area hasn't been easy. Yep, I hear that frequently. And the other thing is a lot of states will call things different names. So so in Oregon, our day support programs that occur outside of the school setting after people exit school, it's called day support and activities programs. I tried 3 different group home placements, but the third group home seems to be pretty good. Great. We're going to talk a little bit about, and that's why I love this setting is at the end, we're going to have quite a bit of time for us to all kind of share things we've learned. One of the cool resources you're going to be getting along the way today is a tool to help you evaluate a group home. And I feel like that tool is just kind of a starting point because I feel like as I talk to more families, there's additional things. Ad- Also, I should also share I have an adopted sister that experiences developmental disabilities as well. She started her life in a group home and has moved to supported living, and so she's given me the permission to share her story as well today, which is awesome. So I'll be sharing that a little bit later. All right. Feel free to keep adding to the chat. We're going to be reviewing this as we go to add to what we might cover in the future. So, Medicaid waivers for children and adults. So, um, you have options in terms of settings for supports. And one of those options, the one we're going to be focusing on here, is called Home and Community-Based Services. It's abbreviated HCBS. They first became available in 1983. That waiver initially was called 1915C, and it's because it's in Section 1915 of the Social Security Act. And it basically gives states the option to choose, rather than following all the Medicaid rules governing institutional care, they can do what's called receive a waiver for those rules and provide care in a home and community-based setting following a different set of rules. That's the basic idea behind waivers. 47 states and DC are operating at least one 1915C waiver. On this slot, on this page, we have this website, Kids Waivers. So I'm gonna navigate to it. It's one of my favorite sites. I use it a lot when I'm speaking with families that are trying to navigate services. But you're like, but Les, the kids waivers are for kids. Where are the adult waivers? And I'm glad you asked. So if you go search by state, and then, you can choose whatever state you want. I'm just going to go with Oregon for now. In Oregon, if you scroll to the bottom, they have a bunch of different options, and then it will, for each state, it's going to have other programs listed, and it will often list out early intervention, Title V. Oregon's waiver is the K waiver is for all ages. So ours is all folded into one waiver, but if you had additional, like let's say you had an I waiver or a J waiver, and we'll talk a little bit about the differences between them, they would be listed right here. So if you're wondering what are some of the other waivers that maybe not, aren't children's waivers, you would find them under the other programs on the Kids Waivers website, which is a really cool resource. That's why I put it in there. If you click on these different links, they'll take you to the different types of waivers. If you start with the C waiver, a lot of those waivers are children's waivers, specific to living in their own homes or in the community in some fashion. The I waiver is again directed to a whole state plan, and it's again focused on community-based services. That is more for adults. The J waiver is called a self-directed waiver. And the difference between a self-directed waiver, and again, it's super complex and it differs by state, but the main difference is in a self-directed waiver, rather than having a brokerage or having a case manager that's deciding how, with you, of course, but how your resources are spent. In this waiver, a J waiver, that's all directed by the individual or their guardian slash, if they have a conservator, it might be their conservator. So that's the difference between J waivers and the other ones. And we already briefly talked about the K waiver, which is the community first choice waiver. The great thing again about that is there are no wait lists by the rules of that waiver. So again, like I said, we're going to be skipping a stone across a lot of this. I know that was really brief, but the cool thing is they're all linked there. If you want to check them out, you can go through and review them. And we're moving right along. So Office of Developmental Disability Services. These are disability services in your state. It might have different names. Some states have it run through the county. Some states have it all run through the state at the state level. Some states, like mine, have part of the state run by counties and part of the state run by third party private businesses, basically. So let's go ahead and put into the chat, what changes do you see happening in supports during this transition to adulthood? And we're blessed because we have some people who have already gone through this. What changes did you see happen in terms of services when your loved one transitioned to adulthood? So if you'll put that in the chat, what kind of changes did you see happen in supports during that transition to adulthood? Or what do you think's going to happen? You can put that too. Services include programs, but I said did not like the day programs available. Yes, day programs can vary significantly. Um, I've seen day programs where it's just get in a van and drive around and maybe see some sights. And I've seen day programs where they take tons of trips to state parks. I've seen day programs that are attached to Special Olympics and they do all kinds of, athletic activities. I was able to get more hours to hire people to help with the care. That's great. That's often what happens. And we'll talk a little bit about that interview process and assessment process as your loved one transitions to adulthood. Feel free to keep adding them. I'm going to move along to the next thing, which is disability services and supports for transition. So, in your annual plan, most states require you to update a plan annually on how supports are going to be provided through the state disability supports. And in this plan, there's often a section on employment, and they'll usually refer to it as a career development plan. Depends on the state, of course. Consider your activities of daily living and how they're going to be delivered moving forward. And so this is where, like, if I'm going to put a giant caution sign up, this is where I'd put it. Often in these interviews, case managers are going to be trying to figure out what supports are you as a parent going to provide versus what supports is the state or disability services in the state going to be providing. And I just really want you to think long and hard about that because the more things you say you're going to do, the fewer things the state will step in to do. And I feel like thinking about how you are going to plan around maybe not being able to do as much lifting as you age and things like that is really important. I know it's not possible in every state, but I think having that conversation during those annual reviews is really important. And I've had, even in my state where I feel like there's lots of support, not that it's perfect, it is definitely not. But there's lots of support provided relative to some other states. A lot of parents will get in these interviews and say, yes, I'm going to do that. Yes, I'm going to do the lifting for the tub. Yes, I'm going to, do all the transporting for appointments. And when you say, yes, you're going to do everything, then the state takes you at your word. And then I feel like you might be limiting opportunities to gain independence. And it's going to maybe make a challenge if, you have to get a knee replacement or something and you can't do lifting as much, right? So be thinking about that as you go through those processes. The way those are evaluated, according to Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, is through these things called activities of daily living and instrumental activities of daily living. And so they'll be assessing your loved one based on what activities of daily living they need support with and determine how much support they'll be getting. Consider how to transition, including supports for independence. So please have a mind toward what independence might look like for your loved one, even if it's small. Be thinking about how you might be able to gain as much independence as possible. Employment supports are things like job coaching, discovery, which is like finding what kind of careers you might be interested in, employment path, small group, job development. And then we have Northwest Access Fund link right here. This is a great toolkit. So if you're wondering, how do I navigate SSI? How do I go through and navigate my application to Social Security when my loved one turns 18 or at the initial application? And that can be done by going through this toolkit. I'm going to pause for a second. Ashley, if you could hit the annotate and clear. Let me see if, yeah, I'm going to hit clear all drawings. There we go. Just somebody had accidentally swiped on the screen, it looked like. So I got it. Never mind. We're good. And then the Northwest Access Fund webinar is this is an organization, it's a nonprofit in our region. They have tons of resources. They had a really great person who works through Social Security appeals do a presentation for us. And I've included the link here. They were okay with me sharing it, so I'm sharing it. And it has a passcode here as well, and that is a period between the capital F and R. But great resource, cool toolkit. Again, I only have the time I have, so I went through and grabbed additional things that you can watch on your own time. And that toolkit right there is probably the best thing I've ever seen, and I've been at this a long time for navigating that Social Security application. It walks you through every form you have to fill out, things you want to consider as you fill out that form, what order you do things in, how you turn it into the Social Security office, timelines, etc. So it's great. The main thing to know is that you'll be turning that in after they turn 18, and there will be a lag time. It will take them time to process, them being Social Security, time to process your application. If you are found to qualify, they will pay you back pay, but it's based on when you applied. So be planning to get that application in as soon as possible, right after your loved one turns 18. Um, we'll talk a little bit about person-centered planning. I've given you lots of resources here. Life Course Nexus is a person-centered planning organization. They have a huge, just a giant resource bank of planning tools. This is one I'd love to do a way deeper dive on, but we only have the time we have. So I'm just going to take you over to the planning tools page real quick. One of my favorite tools on here is called the Integrated Support Star, and it's a way of planning your loved one's future utilizing these tools. And so this is the integrated support star right here. And basically it's looking at some sort of issue, placing it at the center, and then looking at all the resources you have available to you. And I know it's too small to see right now, but I love this tool, highly recommend it. And if you want a deep dive on it, I would love to go through all these planning tools. But can't say enough wonderful things about Life Course Nexus, and a lot of state disability um, organizations, state agencies, I should say, are relying on Life Course Nexus as their person-centered planning model. So that makes it really nice if everyone's speaking the same language. And again, the idea of person-centered planning is placing the individual that experiences, in this case, experiences a disability at the center of the decision making and having their voice in the decision making as much as possible. I also included a link to the National Technical Assistance Center on Transition. You'll have to make an account with them, but they have tons of webinars. This is a professional training organization. They train vocational rehabilitation counselors, case managers for disability services and others. But I asked them, hey, is it okay if parents do it? And they said, sure, have parents sign up. So you have free access to that. All you have to do is make an account. There's a link there. This toolkit called Planning My Way to Work, if you're thinking about work for your loved one, that's a great resource. It is based on Life Course Nexus, so you see a lot of overlap if you decide to go that route. If you have somebody who can do what's called a path plan, which is a hour and a half, 2 hour process of planning like the next 3 years for your loved one. I'm a certified path planner. It's an involved process. You need two path planners to do it, but that to me is like the gold standard. If you're like so many of the parents and families that I work with, if you're like, I just don't even know where to start, that's a great place to start. If your loved one has an idea of what they might like to do, you start from there and you build out the individual's next 3 years with their input. And then lastly, I have so many templates for one-page profiles through Chef Kids. This comes from England, hence that's what you're seeing over here on the right is one of these templates for person-centered planning. So I know this is a whirlwind. I'm just kind of trying to point out a lot of different resources as we go. I'm a firm believer in person-centered planning. My daughter Glow has had one of these one-page profiles ever since she was exiting preschool. And in her IEP meetings, she goes around and hands out in her annual special education meetings, she goes around and hands out her person-centered plan. That's been her engagement. Um, Even when she was real little. And now she has a little bit more engagement. She shares some of the things she likes, and I also keep her around for strengths. I see Tuesday says we do it too. It's great. We call it superhero report. I love it. I'm gonna call it superhero report too, Tuesday. All right. So that was talk day support program and work. So I've heard a little bit about day supports. I think it's really important. We'll talk about some of the key things around when you're seeking out day supports, what to look for. There's When somebody says they've seen one day support program, you've seen one day support program. Yes, there are some similarities, but it's really the people working there, the activities they do. Those are the kind of things we're going to be diving into and talking about. And I know some places don't have as many options. You may only have one, hopefully at least one. Um, but it doesn't mean you can't start to inject new ideas. And I've seen day support programs, you know, get really involved, loved ones and families, and they talk with the people running the program and see like how could we integrate Special Olympics? How could we, go on this trip to, see the state park? How could we do all these different things? And I think if you come at it with that idea of like, how can we maybe accomplish some of these other goals that individuals that are participating in the program have, that's a great way to go about doing it. Anyway, the question on this slide that we love to see answered in the chat is the pathway to working can look a lot of different ways. Has your loved one ever volunteered, worked, interned? Have they, maybe gone along? And I run a program where I work with students that are in special education. I pair them with mentors, and they go out and do work experiences together. And I know there's a huge spectrum in CFC, as well with the students I work with. Sometimes it's just volunteering. Sometimes it's just to be out in the community, and maybe it's they go to a place they really like. We have like fishing roundup days around here, and sometimes they just go and hang out with the people who are volunteering and doing what they can to help with fishing day. There's all kinds of things that have happened that have been awesome opportunities. Has anybody pursued employment, looked at employment, worked with a job coach? I know it's a little bit of stretch. Or maybe participated in a day support program that maybe worked on employment skills or volunteered. Sometimes they'll volunteer and they'll do things like cleanups, or they'll volunteer and set up for events in the community. Not seeing a lot of people jump on that one. All right. Well, we'll talk about it a little bit. So, day support programs can look a lot of different ways. We mentioned it. Programs, they're usually Medicaid funded, but also sometimes run by charities. I've seen Easter Seals run some programs. I've seen a lot of different nonprofits run different programs. Again, traditionally and typically it's been Medicaid funded in the United States. Program types, things I've seen, and I'd love if you want to add this as well, and I see somebody put in the chat, and I'll get to that. If you've participated or have your loved one participate in a day support program, and I know we've had a couple people mention, but if you could mention what type of program was that day support program? Does it fit any of these categories I'm about to cover, or maybe it was a different type? So recreation day supports, they're often like Special Olympics. They might go to like the YMCA and work out together. We have group exercise classes taught by people who experience disabilities in my community, which is great. Um, Arts and community engagement, that's where I would really classify the day support program that my sister participates in California. social interaction and day trips. So sometimes it's like we go to the movies once a week, or we might, do some sort of social gathering. There's been a lot of there's one organization that does speed friending because isolation and loneliness is a big challenge in the disability community. So they do these not speed dating, speed friending, but speed friending workshops. But same kind of idea where you rotate and you get to talk to each person for a little bit, a couple minutes, right? And see if you can make a connection, and then that might become your buddy on the next, day trip, etc. So most programs do a variety of activities. Tip, please, please. Visit the program and go on an outing or spend a day and see if it's a good fit for your loved one. A lot of programs will let you come along, or maybe they'll say, "Hey, we're going to be at this location and you could be there too because it's public, and you can see if this is a good fit for you." So, we're going to dive into the chat. We're about halfway in. I know I'm going pretty fast, but I want to make sure we get to the end and to questions. So I see Brandy shared that um, her son is currently working with a job coach to get into competitive integrated employment. Minimum wage is still legal here in Texas. Yes. And the work I do, so in my summer work experience program, I train the mentors, and most of them are from the general education population, but not all of them. But I train the mentors in job coaching skills, Brandy, and it really does wonders for them, because then when they go out into the workplace, they have all these skill sets that job coaches have to help support the individual, their buddy in the peer-to-peer program and as they work. And they both get paid, and they both get paid the same amount in my program. So I'm a firm believer. I feel like job coaching skills are super important. I'm glad that your son got to participate in that. I know of a parent in North Carolina who has a 21-year-old son in a day program where she pays out of pocket, even though her son has the waiver. And that's true. Some programs have additional costs that may not everything may be covered by the Medicaid waivers, etc. So I'm going to clear the drawings again. But yeah, that could happen. Doesn't have to be, but it could. So we'll close that. Now we'll talk work. Again, I come from a state that this is the focus. We're what's called an employment first state. There's many of them around the nation, and that means that if somebody wants to work, that's their choice, and it's an option given, and in this case, it's given first. They don't have to work if they don't want to, but if they want to, then we want to support them in that. So you can check out the links here. There's one link to some curriculum on supported employment and what kind of topics are there. I have a video about what job coaching is, which is what Brandy brought up. It's a short, all these are really short videos. This one's like 2 minutes, I think, and it just covers the basics about what a job coach does. And then I have the training manual for a job coach, because I know some of us are really rural and maybe that's not an option. Like there's no job coach in my area. I serve my square mileage that I serve in Southwest Oregon is, about the land area of Connecticut and Massachusetts combined. That's how many square miles I serve. So it's a huge area. And as you can imagine, some of those places are pretty rural. One of the places I serve, I actually have to, it's faster to drive from where I live 2.5 hours south into California, then over to the coast, and then back up the coast of Oregon. Anyway, just so point being that if you are rural, what could you do? Well, if it's something you really want to pursue, this link right here takes you to the job coaching manual for the state of, you are like drum roll. By the way, this is the manual I use to train my students in job coaching, the North Dakota State Job Coaching Manual. And so you can go through, check it out. It's freely available online. They don't, they want people using it. And so it has a lot of cool ideas about how you might support somebody, and that's linked here. But there's other things in here, like we've talked a little bit about sheltered workshops. There's that 14C certificate. Those are the certificates that allow an employer to pay lower than minimum wage for an individual that experiences disabilities. And if you want to learn more about that, I have a link there. But now I'm going to get into how do we navigate benefits and employment, right? There's this commonly referred to issue that I'm sure we've all heard of. I know I grew up hearing it all the time. You know, if my loved one that experiences disabilities works, they might lose their benefits. How do we navigate that and also pursue work? So there are ways to do it. Able accounts, there that's one way. Now, able accounts are basically bank accounts. The assets or the money that's in those bank accounts are shielded from um, counting by Social Security, Medicaid, and housing. If it's federal housing, it's supposed to be shielded. Um, and I have all the background on that. I have all these letters from the, Housing and Urban Development HUD and stuff to help if you want more details. But even better than that is the Able National Resource Center is there. What if my state never started an Able account? Never bought into the Able system. That's fine. You can actually join an Able account in another state and still utilize that, even if you're not in a state that provides Able. So Oregon, I know, has an Able account. You can do that across states. Uh, if there is a state tax benefit, you won't be getting that in your state. So for example, and I don't know for sure if like, let me just pick a state that might not. South Dakota, I don't think does. So if you're in South Dakota and you open an Able account in Oregon, Oregon has a state tax benefit, a deduction for the money you put into your Able accounts for someone. You're obviously not going to get an Oregon tax deduction in South Dakota, right? Because you live in South Dakota. But you can still have the Able account. You can still put money into it. You can still withdraw. You can put a debit card attached to this with lots of limitations and there's lots of flexibility. I love that about Oregon's Able account. So you can put notifications if there's money spent. You can limit it to $100. There's a lot of things you can do. Um, and once the individual turns 18, though, that's their money, unless you're a conservator or guardian of them, then you can still have oversight of the Able account. So just note that. The other thing that's on here is called the student earned income exclusion. While your loved one is still a student, they can earn up to $2,350 per month or $9,460 a year that adjusts for inflation every year. Those numbers are the 2025 numbers. I have a one pager that explains it here. And this basically, while you'll notify Social Security, hey, my loved one's still a student. We're going to be utilizing the student earned income exclusion. So you can utilize that, from the time in your state your loved one can start working until they exit high school. Most states that's 21. That's the end of the schooling, the year they turn 21, but some states it's even longer than that. So this is a really great opportunity if you want to try work out and not have it impact benefits. That's a great way to do it. There's also Ticket to Work, and there's a bunch of other programs through Social Security to help people try work if they'd like to. There's work trial periods. There's a bunch of things. Able and the student earned income exclusion can be combined to help you. So remember, one is focused on income and the other Able. So student earned income exclusion is focused on income. Able accounts are focused on your total assets. So you have both of those, tests slash thresholds for Social Security. So you have to consider both of those. So having those two things working together while your loved one's still a student to try work works really great. Now I'm just going to give you some anecdotal evidence. In the 4 years I've been running my summer work experience program, I've had well over 100 students through the program. Not all of them received SSI or Social Security, but many did, and were yet to lose $1. No student has lost any money. And and that's because they qualify for the student earned income exclusion. And so it took a little bit in the beginning working with our Social Security office to make sure they understood what that was, since it's kind of was new to them. But as soon as they knew that, it really didn't become an issue. So we are now at 5:43. I promised I would get done, and we're getting close. We're over halfway. So now we're going to talk about vocational rehabilitation. What are your concerns around engaging in work? I just mentioned one of them, right? Maybe two. So if you could put in the chat any concerns you have on engaging in work, or maybe um, if you have concerns around, even if they're volunteering, if there's concerns around volunteering, I just sort of see it as another opportunity to get out in the community, right? And see if there's something that the individual would really love to do. My sister teaches all kinds of art classes now, though. My sister that experiences disabilities and lives in supported living. And so she's kind of worked her way to that point, and I could see that being one of the pathways she pursues. Super proud of her. She just won the first place ribbon in the Reading area fair for painting she did. So anybody engaged with vocational rehabilitation? Yeah. So there's some concerns around the new Medicaid work requirements and what will happen with voc rehab, what will happen with that. We'll talk about that. I've been buried in the in the Medicaid federal stuff for the last couple months. But happy to talk about that. But that would take the whole time. So I'll do it at the end. But yeah, that's definitely a concern. What's going to happen with work requirements? What might happen there? All right, well, let's dive in and talk a little bit about vocational rehabilitation. I have a link here. This link will take you to a YouTube video of the onboarding process for vocational rehabilitation in Oregon. The nice thing is vocational rehabilitation is a national program that all the states have it. Um, it was actually born out of post-World War II. Um, a lot of veterans coming home needed additional supports to access employment. And first we got sort of the veterans vocational rehabilitation, and then we got general civilian vocational rehabilitation added on later. So the first part is you're going to do onboarding. They'll do some assessments. They'll make sure that your disability impacts your employment significantly enough that you need their services. Then you'll meet with your vocational rehabilitation counselor. They'll go through and do some more assessments, think about some accommodations, think about what employment options you might want to consider, and then you're going to make an IPE. I love these acronyms because it always confuses people because they think IEP, right? Like your education plan or program, I should say. But in this case, they're talking about your individual plan for employment. So that's vocational rehabilitation's annual plan. So you see that like every single one of these things has an annual plan that you make. Now, the IPE, I wouldn't say it's really an annual plan. It's a plan that you update as you need more resources, or maybe you need a different accommodation, or you started work at this location and you want to get a promotion, and so your boss tells you, hey, you need these skills, so you go back to your vocational rehabilitation counselor, you work on how you're going to attain those skills so you can get your promotion. So there's a lot of opportunities in vocational rehabilitation. They do wonderful work. I'm a huge fan. Um, Highly recommend them. That said, of course it differs from state to state and even from region within the state, your experience. And some places have more resources and some places have less. That said, I would at least reach out. And if employment is even in the cards at all, I would highly recommend working with vocational rehabilitation because they have all kinds of resources that can help. Um, there's vocational rehabilitation specific to visual impairment. So they have people who specialize if you experience blindness or visual impairments, and they have additional trainers that can come out and help both navigate like let's say you need to navigate the public transit system to get to your work or whatever. They can help with that. There's all kinds of great resources. So I just say reach out, try it out, see if it works for you. I left in a slide about the program I run, some students I work with, and one of the worksite coordinators. There's a podcast here that's really long that explains the whole program along with a little article. But I just want more people to know, and this is becoming more popular around the nation to utilize mentors. And one of the proudest things about my summer work experience program, this peer-to-peer program that I run, that I just finished like a week and a half ago, is that we have students that experience disabilities that have been in the program a couple years now, and now they're mentors for other students. So they're now seniors in high school, and they're mentoring the sophomores and the juniors that are coming in that experience disabilities as well. And that's kind of the dream, right? That these students are able to get enough confidence and feel confident enough that not only do they feel like, yeah, I can do this work, but I feel like I can support another um, you know, fellow peer in this work. So my favorite program, one of the favorite things I do, there's an article here if you want to check it out. And please, if people are interested in copying it, just reach out to us. We want this program around the country. So do other people. So now I'll talk about post-secondary education and training. So don't just think community college or university, think about any other training. Maybe, Job Corps, which I know is a little bit of a question mark right now, but I've had a lot of students go to Job Corps. I've had students do training with unions. A union picked them up and said, "Hey, we'll train you." So, what is your goal for post-secondary education and training for your loved one? Or what's your loved one's goal? Go ahead and you can put that in the chat. Any goals you have, post-secondary education, post-secondary training, goals you have. It could be, something specific to um, maybe how do they navigate, their housing, or how do they navigate transportation? Could be a lot of things. Just a little bit. Okay. I won't stop too long because we got about 10 minutes and I might land this ship on time, which would be a miracle. I might. All right, here we go. So, college and training, feel free to add anything into the chat if you wish. So, it might be picking a major or picking a community education program. Might be where do I choose to go? A lot of people are going, I don't really know if college is for my student or my loved one. This might not be in the cards for them. I really would encourage you to watch this documentary called Intelligent Lives, and look into these Think College programs here at the bottom. I now feel like I should probably move that to the top because um, we have a program at Portland State University called Career and Community Studies in the state of Oregon. And that program is really designed. They're at the university, they're going to some classes, they're usually taking them credit, no credit, or pass fail, however, they're scoring it. And they're going out in the community and um, fellow students from like the social work program and the education program are coming alongside those students as mentors and helping them. They're tutoring them. They're going out and helping them and getting job skills. There's all kinds of additional supports. And so this is really sort of, um, I would see it as an expansion of what most people would call like an 18 to 21 program, but more it's on a college campus and you're experiencing lots of different opportunities in the community. You're getting trained in how to, utilize public transit. You're getting trained in how to, set up your schedule for the week and how to go to work and how to balance work and school and all the things. So I'm a big fan, as you can tell, of the Think College programs. That might not be for everyone, of course, but I just want people to know that these programs exist. When people sit down and think about college, they often think, okay, four-year university, that's probably not, my student is often what I hear, right? But there's all these other programs that are out there, and Think College is a great place to start to see if there's one in your state. Um, Other things, other opportunities. meeting with, if you are going to attend a college or community college, meeting with the Disability Services Office. That's also a job I used to have, setting up accommodations at a college. Um, and that whole transition from Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, supports accommodations and modifications to, once you get to college, you're covered under the Americans with Disability Act and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. And that is really only accommodations. Um, and are there costs associated with Think College programs? Yes. But for example, the Portland State University program, even though it's a certificate program, it does qualify for financial aid. Their program got that done. It's called a Title IV qualification, I think. Anyway, so there are ways to get support. Additionally, one of the wonderful things vocational rehabilitation can do is help pay for your education. So you'll have to pick a specific major. It needs to be related to your work field, but they can help pay, and they can pay for equipment and things like that. And you could use 529 plans. That's another great resource as well, which is a tax incentivized savings program. And you often get tax benefits, depends on the state. Um, but it's a college savings program. Thank you, Tuesday. So there's a couple things there. Now, with 6 minutes to spare, we'll talk housing, but I'm not going to rush housing. I'll take a bit of time. So, what setting? So here's the prompt. Share in the chat. What setting does your loved one want to move into after moving out of their current home, whether it's now or in the future? So I've been talking with my daughter who's 11. Well, Glo, where do kind of place? And she's seen a lot of different places in her time, right? She's seen, some apartments, and she's seen her house, and she's seen where some of her friends live, and just kind of like, do you want to live with a bunch of people? Do you want to? And she's talked with her aunt who has lived in group homes, and sort of the pros and cons. Now, Glo's only 11, but it's never too early to start talking about transition and start thinking about what you might want to do. So, what setting do you think your loved one, or what have they shared with you that they might want to move into after they're done living where they're currently living, whether it's now or in the future? You thinking group home? Are you thinking maybe a relative? That's another one I hear oftentimes. Yeah, Avery might live with their will live with their siblings. Great. That's a common one. My dream right now for Gloria is to uh, build a little version of what Lacey's got, a little house onto the side of my house. Tuesday says we're hoping we might be able to build an ADU. That's me, Tuesday. That's what I'm thinking right now. It's actually right behind me is where I'd build it, right on the other side of the wall in my room above my garage where I'm sitting right now. Um, don't know if Lacey's thought about it, said Teresa. Yeah, Teresa, you inspired me. I was like, hey, I love that idea, and might just extend the roof line and build another little ADU. All righty. Well, let's dive in. Let's talk about housing options now. Hopefully, it gives people a chance to kind of digest. And I know I've been talking fast, but we're at the end, and I did it in about an hour, so I about had to go about that fast. But let's talk about it. A lot of people, of course, thinking, parents' home. If you are going to have your loved one live inside your home, just be thinking about SSI. And if you are going to utilize SSI resources for your loved one, then they can be paying rent, room and board, border agreements. That's in your resource link. It's also in that toolkit I was talking about at the very beginning from Northwest Access Fund. So this can give you sort of a template to use when you're setting up that agreement if you're going to have your loved one pay rent. So you can utilize those resources to do, handle housing, etc. Yeah, SSI, you can have them pay rent. Highly encourage you to watch that Northwest Access Fund video with the person who does all the appeals for SSI. She talks about the amounts. I'm not a benefits counselor. That's a like a you have to get certified. I'm just sharing some of the resources. But yeah, that video, that webinar that I shared in the beginning with the little password, they cover all of that in that webinar. That webinar is about 45 minutes, and you'll see me in it because I was asking her questions. Some of it was because other people were nudging me in the meeting. Hey, Les, ask him about the student earned income exclusion so the other people know about it. So anyway, um, adult foster, so that's an option. Some people have talked about that. Um, and so I have the screening tool for adult foster and group homes linked here. It's an awesome resource. I'd love to know if there's things you like to add or take away. Feel free to message me in our Facebook group because the screening tool, although I think it's a great place to start, I think it could always be better. And then supported living. And this one we are going to watch this video because I love this program. It's called Grand Care. I'm going to have to stop sharing because I need to make sure I pulled the audio when I shared so that you guys will be able to hear it. So give me 1 sec. I'm going to stop sharing, but I'm going to come right back. I just need to make sure I pulled audio. One participant host. Okay. Share and optimize for video sharing. Okay, share this. Share. Okay. Now it should have pulled the audio. We'll find out. But I'm going to go to the Grand Care model. So supported living has really taken on a few different versions, and the newest one is this um, technology-based supported living. So there's pros and cons to this, just like with anything else. I just want you all to have seen it because it's become really big in the southern United States. I believe Grand Care, who this one is based on, is out of Colorado. All right. Let me just make sure. Turn on the chat. Okay, so I have the chat on. Let's see. Let me know if you can hear it when I hit play in the chat. I haven't. Yeah. Can you hear it? Say yes or no.
This is John. He's 25 years old. John used to live with his parents, but now he's out on his own. John used to rely on his parents to remind him to do all the little things he needed to do during his day, like teeth brushing and eating meals. But now that John is on his own, he uses Grand Care to provide these reminders and prompts. Grand Care even reminds him when it's time to take his medication, no matter where he is in the house, or if he's out and about. And when John needs anything, help is never more than a touch away. Grand Care helps John in other ways too. John's remote support team is always ready to help, and Grand Care notifies them if something needs attention. John loves playing the games, especially Bubble Popper. And he loves all of the videos. John is more independent than he ever thought possible, thanks to Grand Care and his support team. Want to know more about how Grand Care can help your organization? Book your free consultation now.
So I'm just gonna back out of that. So that gives you a little introduction to utilizing the technology-based supported living. I'll just kind of rewind my and tell a little bit of my sister's story since she was okay with me sharing it. When my sister, this is like very early 2000s, so she graduated high school, I think in like 2002, and she stayed at home for a little bit, then wanted some more independence, so she moved into a group home. And the challenge at that time, and I think still to this day, is there really was this cliff. If you weren't, um, if you weren't in a group home, and or sorry, if you were in a group home, if you were in a group home and you wanted to move to supported living, then it was really a cliff. There wasn't really a ton of support to get you from the group home setting to supported living and more independent setting. You just kind of had to dive out there and see if you made it. Um, and now there are models that I think are much better. This is sort of the lowest level of support model, this technology model, in my opinion. I think it's great. It works great for some individuals, and I'm sure there's a lot of you going, that won't work for my loved one. Then there's these other models. So let's talk about some of them. I really love this model called SAIL. SAIL is a model. It's more of a it's a uh, yeah, it's group home-esque, but it's a imagine condominiums often is the structure, and they have maybe a roommate or two, each has their own bedroom, and then there's support staff within this condo structure, right? That can come and support. Some of them live in the units with them or are there. Some units have people in there all the time, and some only have people visiting. So that's one model. And then I mentioned, there is this cliff of you're either in a group home setting or you were in independent living or supported living setting. And Celia is one of these resources that I find amazing. They have 5 tiers of independence, starting with sort of testing the water and in a group home setting, maybe you're visiting and in the first tier, uh, just for a weekend to see if this is a good fit for you, if this is the kind of living arrangement you want. Next setting is now you're there a week with weekends back with your family and you're in a group home setting and you're seeing, is this a good fit? Is this right? The next one is, now you're going to be a little bit more independent. Maybe there's not a support professional there in the building all the time, but there's one nearby that can come if you need assistance. To now you're independent with in a supported living situation with a support professional who comes by a couple times a week and helps you, all the way to full independence with maybe a support professional coming by to help you shop and things like that, which is really like where my sister's at currently. She gets help with shopping and some and maybe help getting to her day support program. But that's about it. So just wanted you to know that and you can go and check out these models, see all these different opportunities. Um, then planning for the next stage of care, wrapping up. If you could put in the chat, who will care for your loved one next? Group home, adult foster, relatives, supported living, independent living. We kind of hit on this, but now you've seen some other options. Love to see what you're thinking. I can tell you right now, I'm in Tuesday's camp. I'm thinking accessory dwelling unit or a little house next to my house is what I'm thinking. Is what I'm thinking right now. Yeah, depends on what happens with the Medicaid situation. Definitely, that will have a big impact. I'm thinking little house next to my house. Uh, Turning your house into sponsored residence. That's cool. There's some programs up in like Michigan, Teresa, that I could point you to. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but that I think would be great resources for how to go about doing that. Feel free to keep adding in the chat. I'd love to hear from you all. Feel free if there's anything I haven't touched on yet, if you add that in the chat too, or things you'd like deeper dives on, that'd be great. So let's talk about that. The plan for the future. I know it's the hardest, it's one of the toughest things to think about. I'm getting emotional thinking about it right now myself. I've seen a lot of things in my time, as I'm sure you all have. I mean, I've been disability advocate since the 1980s. So yes, I'm that old. When I was real young, my parents were big in disability advocacy in California. Um, so if there's no plan, what happens? Often the government decides, in my experience. Um, So if there's no plan and something happens, I've had situations in the past where, a person experiencing disabilities is raised by their grandparent. The grandparent passed away suddenly, and then their case manager shows up, right? They're trying to deal with the loss of the person who's taking care of them. The case manager now needs to find somewhere for them to be, and they're going to go to all the group homes in the state. They're going to spin a wheel, and they're not going to really spin a wheel, but that's what it feels like sometimes. And sometimes the only opening in a group home might be, 10 hours away in rural Eastern Oregon, right? Nobody they know is over there. That's where they're going to go because that's where there's an opening. So, not having a plan often means the government decides, and most people don't like that answer. So then we start talking about, okay, well, what are you thinking about for housing? And, after you're done, you're or not able to provide the supports, what is that housing going to look like? And we already kind of talked about that. Depends on where you live at that point. Yep, I hear you, Tuesday. Depends on where you're at. A lot of people mention relatives. One suggestion I would make about the relative situation, just because I've seen it work really well and I've seen it not work well, is do those trial runs. Especially if it's a relative they don't see all the time, right? So if it's great Aunt Gertrude who lives, on the other side of the country, you might want to do a trial run over a vacation or a long weekend to see, is this a good fit? Is it something they really want to do? Is it something they can do, etc.? That's a great way to do it. Yeah, they need to know what they're getting into, right, Teresa? So I really love that idea, and I've seen it work wonders because the person that's a relative really wants to know that too, right? Maybe they've talked about it, their heart's in it, but having that experience before before real time, before it's the rest of the life kind of situation, allows them to ask questions while you're still here, right? Allows them to get additional help while everybody's still around and can support and help. So it's a to me it's kind of a gift to the person that might be a relative that is contemplating providing that support. I've seen it be really successful. Next thing is guardianship. Every state's a little different on guardianship. Yes, there are some commonalities. I've provided the Disability Rights Oregon Guardianship Handbook. Every state has its own disability rights organization. Feel free to reach out to yours. They usually have some sort of guardianship handbook or explanation for your state available. I'm yet to run into one that doesn't. And if it doesn't, you can tell them get on it because they should have one. So here's the handbook for Oregon on guardianship, and this website, it gives you a basic breakdown of what guardianship is. Couple things to note about guardianship. The individual who's under guardianship will lose their ability to vote. And in guardianship, a lot of times people assume it means loss of all rights. Does not have to be that way. Sometimes, and most of the time, judges, especially in my experience, especially in Oregon, judges will provide guardianship under certain areas of the individual's life, and maybe not others. So just keep that in mind. If you go through this handbook, it is not all specific to Oregon. There are great questions in there you'll want to know the answers to as you go through that guardianship process. So highly encourage you to print out that handbook on guardianship. It's fantastic. It has lots of great questions, things to think about. Conservatorship, the difference between that is conservatorship is really focused on the individual that experiences disabilities, ability to manage their money and any assets they have. And so that's what conservatorship is. Some people might have a conservator and not a guardian, right? And so just keep that in mind. And I mentioned it up here, but didn't really talk about it. A rep payee. I can tell you, representative payees, what they do is they are the ones who they're kind of like having a personal accountant we'll say it that way, for the individual that experiences disabilities to keep track of their Social Security payments, help them make sure the rent's paid, help them have spending money and keep track of their spending money and things like that. Um, there's great experiences with representative payees, and had people have terrible experiences. Uh, the cautionary thing I'll say about representative payees is not really about them. It's if you're in a situation, and some people might find themselves in this situation, where maybe within the family there's conflict, maybe there's been a divorce or things like that, and maybe not everybody agrees on things. It will make your life infinitely easier, and you'll avoid all kinds of questions if you have a representative payee handling the money. Because then there can't be allegations about somebody's taking money that shouldn't be taken, etc. I've seen it happen a million times. It's not a pleasant thing to talk about, but my job is to share everything with you, and then you decide what to do with it. That's one of the benefits of having a rep payee. It's great for some people's situations, and other people are like, I just don't want the extra person and the middle person in the middle. So, um, I now have about 15 minutes left. I have a nice little review here. I'm not going to take time to go through it because I want to leave time for questions. I also put tons of resources in this folder. I am going to make it nice and organized for you. You have read access basically to this Google Drive folder, but it has a million resources in here. So I'm going to organize it a little bit more than it is right now for you in the next day. But it is the mother lode of resources. You're so welcome, iPhone. I don't know who iPhone is, but I'm glad you found it informative. And now let's go to questions. All right. We have made it to the end. I feel like that was pretty good for the first time through this. All right. One or three things we should do ASAP to prepare for adulthood. So Tuesday says Emmett's 12. Just so you know, most people plan for, I highly recommend starting the transition planning process in junior high. I think 8th grade's perfect. I can tell you when I was a teacher in high school, I taught at a K-12 school. So we would work with the junior high teachers a lot on transition planning, even though technically you don't have to do transition planning until the year the student turns 16, like according to the IEP. But if you're trying to do all this 16 or later, you're trying to cram a whole lot into not much time. There's a lot that has to happen in those 2 years. You'd be running around like crazy. So let's see. One or three things we should do ASAP. So I would say at 12, that young, I would say try to figure out if there's sort of that North Star Tuesday for Emmett, anything he's really interested in, and that can change every year, right? And it might, and that's fine. Think about opportunities in the community, which I'm sure you're already doing, but opportunities for your loved one Emmett to go out and maybe experience different things. Volunteering's great when they're that young, to see if they have interest in those areas and keep track of what they do have interest in and share it with your IEP teams. And then I think at 12, it's really just kind of getting them to think about it a little bit. Maybe if they can even just hand out their one-page profile at the IEP. I also will just mention my favorite way, and the only way I like to start IEP meetings is have every person at the meeting that's there share a strength of the student that's there, right? Have every person share a strength. It's great for the student if they can just stick around for that first part and hear all the wonderful things that their teachers and therapists and others have to say about them. And yeah, get on the wait list. If you have a wait list in your state, get on it. I don't need it right now. Get on it. You don't know when you'll need it, and you don't want to have to be playing catch up if there is a wait list. Teresa says guardianship was explained to us once you establish a guardian, when something happens to you, the new guardian has to petition the court. Yep. To start taking care of your person. So we had to redo our guardianship and make one of our sons co-guardians. That's a good way to do it. I've seen lots of families do that, Teresa. And guardianship, usually you have to renew that. There's some paperwork. I'll say it this way. There's some paperwork you have to do annually. If you have a representative payee, sometimes they'll help with the financial side of that paperwork, which is another nice thing if there's guardianship in the situation. Ashley says it aligns well with the transition planning in the IEP in grades 6 to 9. Yeah, I feel like junior high is a great place to get started. By law, they need to start at age 16, but like I said, that's pretty late in my experience. Um, Working for Apple support. He's certain of that. He wants to work at Apple. Okay. Awesome. Yeah, Glow loves her iPad, and man, she Glow's been taking lots of pictures. And so that's another thing. Notice hobbies. Like Gloria is obsessed with taking pictures of fabrics. And she'll zoom in and get all kinds of wild things going on with these fabric pictures. And she'll do like all kinds of different color adjustments to them. And anyway, it's kind of cool. Um, you can do guardianship of the person where you don't have to do a report every year. Yeah, it depends on the state. It depends really on the state on what their requirements are. I can just say my experience is most states, and I think let's see, I have to talk to my mom, but Texas, Oklahoma, California, Oregon. Um, I know Oregon and California, at least when we were doing it with my sister, I think it was an annual upgrade. We have to pay $5 a year to refile it. Yeah. There's usually a court filing fee with guardianship. Initial guardianship can be very expensive. And in Oregon it runs like 5 to 10,000 dollars for initial guardianship. And some states not as bad, right? Not as intense. Um, yeah, divorce attorney. In North Carolina, $100 court fee. Yeah, it varies from state to state. Yeah, very much. Uh, I don't know if I'm good enough. I don't know if I'm knowledgeable enough to say the answer to that one, Brandy. Rent versus fair share. What's the difference? And there's a benefit from one to the other, or is it the same thing? I think what I'd love to do is bring in my friends who are housing experts to the CFC. Uh, if we want to do another one of these, I really feel like diving deeper into the housing and how to navigate housing and benefits would be a great topic. So I wish I knew the answer to that one, Brandy, but I won't. Oh, I don't know, so I won't answer. Uh, so thank you from Angela and Brennan. Nice to see you all. Um, any other questions? What happens when the parent starts getting Medicare? How does that affect the kid? They get both Medicaid and Medicare. Yeah. And so, the whole Medicaid, Medicare thing, you know, s- again, from based on state to state, Medicaid, let me close that out. Medicaid differs from state to state. Qualifications differ. What some states shift toward Medicare and what they don't. A lot of times durable medical equipment falls under Medicare versus falling under Medicaid, but again, it really depends on the state. So, and in terms of the individual, once they're 18 for now, although as we all know, things are changing quickly. Um, Once they're 18, they are no longer, counting parental income against the um, person experiencing disabilities. Let me add one other thing that's kind of unique about Oregon. Oregon doesn't count parental income and allows the individual experiencing disabilities only if they qualify for disability services to receive Medicaid, which is a godsend. It provides Medicaid only to the child experiencing disabilities and really keeps families from facing, medical bankruptcy and things like that. So I haven't really heard of it changing for the the child in terms of what Williams is asking. Um, once I've never heard of it changing for the child. What does impact the child is uh, if they're under 18 and their parental income, because that often is counted against them. Yeah, I'm selling Oregon. I'm selling Oregon hard. No, I love Oregon. We do a lot of things wonderfully. Does it mean everything's perfect? Please do not think everything's perfect. There are care deserts. There are, gaps. But overall, compared to other states, yes, Oregon does a great job. You can ask your employer to approve insurance for your disabled kid up to age 26. Yeah, my son's 29. You can ask for coverage for adult dependent children. Sure. Um, Minnesota does a great job as well, says Ashley. Good to know. Okay. Any other questions? Things I would encourage you to think about. Um, if you does anybody have like junior high age student or high school age? I know many of those who've shared have older loved ones. I would really encourage you, iPhone person, please talk to your IEP team. I know they might be like, oh, hey, transition's not until they're 16. It doesn't hurt to start talking about it now. And it's also, they might not put anything in that part of the IEP, but it doesn't hurt to say, here's my loved one's goals that they're sharing with you all. This is kind of what they want to do. And that also clues people in as you're going through that IEP meeting to start thinking about what could they do to help gain some more experiences for your loved one in that area. Like if they want to learn about welding, maybe they go on that trip to, the community college to see the welding classes, things like that. That if you don't share that, they just may not know and not think like, hey, this is something that student would benefit from because they just don't know. Okay. Intermediate care facilities, which is the type of group home where my son is at. So there are so many types of group homes, as many stars as there are in the sky. That's how many types of group homes I feel like there are out there. Some of them are more like nursing home kind of settings, and some group homes are more like dorms. I mean, it just really depends on what kind of structure they have. Some are more like um, condo, like almost like a condo or small apartment complexes. Um, I've seen so many different styles. The thing I would share is go out and check out those styles that I shared. Yeah, 24/7 awake staff. And that might be, that's a thing to know. Not every group home will have 24/7 awake staff. That's a good point. If that's something you feel like you need, definitely share that with the case manager so they know. Um, so our kids, are they going to be impacted by the new Medicaid work requirements? So first thing is most of these requirements that most of the changes to Medicaid don't take effect until 2028. I will try to stay as we're not try not to get political, but they don't take effect until 2028. The work requirements are on the surface so far, and I haven't gotten a chance to read through there's like 160 pages in that bill specific to Medicaid. But from what I've read and from what I've seen from Families USA, which does a great section by section breakdown, um, the work requirements are not going to be impacting people who have qualified for for disability, especially disability services uh, and developmental disability services in whatever state. That said, you heard me say state. And so that means that the states are going to have a lot of leeway in how they interpret that. I know we were being told consistently by the people who were passing this bill that it would not impact people that experience disabilities. Um, financially, I don't know how they get to the monetary outcome they're looking for. And for those who don't know, my background is I have a bachelor's in economics and master's in public administration. So I think about this stuff all the time. But anyway, I don't know how they get to the numbers that they were trying to save without it impacting people outside of the adult population they were trying to target. So that said, we'll see. There's a lot that can change between now and 2028. And some of the work requirement pieces for people not on the disability side might be implementing even before that. We may need an ask less hour. That's true, Teresa. We might need a whole hour. I can tell you, I haven't yet. I read through the House bills section by section summary from Families USA. I have not read through the final one. It's sitting in my backpack right now. So, to be determined. But on the final bill, but that part I don't think changed. And I will specifically ask Tuesday the Families USA people that question. And for those who don't know, Families USA is a Washington, D.C. Healthcare and Medicaid specifically advocacy group. They've done a lot of wonderful work. I would say most of these Medicaid changes are set to happen after the midterm elections, and the majority of them aren't happening until 2028. I can't say every single one because I haven't read the whole thing yet of the final version, but most of what I read was it's happening after the midterms in 2028. So, and I have to look what exact day. Does that mean January 1, 2028? I have to go look. But yeah. So we got a little breathing room, I guess is the good part. Like, okay. Any other questions? We're almost at 6:30. Thank you so much for being so engaged. It makes it so much better when everyone's engaged. I feel like they were engaged, Ashley.
Yes, thank you so much. I was going to say, I don't think we even grazed the surface of your knowledge. And I think Teresa's idea of an Ask Last Hour would be wonderful if we ever have the opportunity. But I know that Les is really passionate about this. It did a lot of work to gather resources for everybody. So he's going to kind of sort through them and organize them for us so that we're able to find them easily. And then we will share those out with everybody. So unless there's any last minute questions for Les. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Les. This is great.
I feel like I talked really fast, so I'm sorry. But but like I said, I didn't talk that fast. We wouldn't have gotten through everything. So apologize. Maybe when you watch back the recording, play it back at like 3/4 speed.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it. If you guys have any other questions that you didn't get answered that you really were hoping to get an answer for tonight that can't wait, feel free to email Tuesday or I anytime and we can help connect you with us as well. So, all right. Have a great night, everybody.
Bye, everyone.